Hey Sam, we are here. It's Ruling on the Field, first ever podcast episode. We're fired up. We're about to get right into it because, there's a lot of football to talk about. Obviously, we are coming into this podcast halfway through the season, and there's so much ground that we got to cover here, Sam. I'm joined by my brother, Sam Mendelson, Ruling on the Field podcast. And after further review, we're fired up. How you feeling right now?
I am fired up. I mean, we went to a Browns game a few weeks ago. We felt that energy at the stadium, doing the tailgate, a couple of videos that you should definitely check out on the Ruling on the Field social media accounts. But this is something we've been planning all year. Just timing wasn't right, and now we're ready to go, and I'm ready to kick off.
Yeah, absolutely. This whole podcast is really for the fans, by the fans. Obviously, we are diehard fans. I am an Indianapolis Colts fan, and I've been through quite the roller coaster of the season. Likewise with you, Sam, who's a Dallas Cowboys fan. But we're here to talk about all things football. And just to jump in, because we're going into week 7.
Week 7, yes, a fan. You said fan about 5 times in that sentence. I thought a fan would know we're going into week 7.
You know what? Lots been going on. Every week just feels like a new week. So much exciting things. I said it with a hint of doubt, but regardless, I digress.
The confidence was there. And look, the Cowboys coming off of yesterday's dramatic win over the Chargers, in which Dak played his best game, but there was definitely some struggles. I mean, there's so much to talk about. But Seth, what's the first topic?
I think I want to get into the fact that we've now seen a lot of these teams play a good sample size, and we kind of know who the players are in the league right now. Obviously, a few surprises, but I want to get your thoughts on who's been the team that's just been the most dominant out of the gate, that you're kind of like taking a step back, being like, these guys are legitimate contenders.
Is there any questions? The greatest show on surf. Not turf, but surf. I do like surf and turf pretty good. But right now, it's all about the surf. It's all about the dolphins. It's all about the penguin. It's about the cheetah. I mean, it's the lion kingdom. It's the animal kingdom. Whatever you want to call it in there. I like the name the greatest show on surf. The Dolphins are doing things that, back in the day, Kurt Warner, Isaac Bruce, Marshall Faulk, Torrey Holt. Those are the guys that I think of when I think of that great offense. Every week, these guys are exploding. I mean, for huge gains. Raheem Mostert had a whole rejuvenation in Miami. Mike McDaniel's probably my favorite coach in the league. He's better than the other Mike I know, who's a coach for the Dallas Cowboys, making a couple questionable calls last night, but we're not going to get into that. But yes, I'm a huge fan of the Dolphins. And when a team puts up 70 points in a game, I mean, you're just sitting there in awe going, okay, just keep putting it on. This isn't, house league where there's like a score limit. They're putting up 70 points against premier defenses, and this week's going to be interesting too against the Eagles on the road. But the Dolphins are my pick as like the most exciting team right now in the league.
Yeah, and that notification just really puts a bow on what your point was, in the sense that this team just has a swagger to them, right? Like, they really come in and they think that they can dominate games. Like, it's very rare that you see a team go in week by week with the mindset of being notified again to do not disturb yourself.
I am not disturbing myself. That was faux pas number one.
Here's the reality. Even though we've had 7 weeks to get our shit figured out, we're still coming at this as rookies. We're still the new kids on the block, and we got a lot of football. We just want to talk football, and that's the reality. And the Dolphins make that fun to talk about, because when you're watching this team each week going on the field, they're explosive. Like, I don't know if I've seen a team as fast or as intimidating to go up against until, as you mentioned, the greatest show on turf. And obviously, when you think of the AFC and dominance, you think of the Chiefs the past few years, and what Patrick Mahomes does each week is very much domination. But we're talking about a team that is just built for speed. Even if their first half, they're a little slower, they get off to a slow start, like we saw last week against Carolina, giving up 14 right off the bat. This team's never out of it. They just can make one quick play to Tyreek Hill. It's one quick run to Raheem Mostert. And I think Tua Tagovailoa is really cementing himself as not just a system quarterback, a guy who can elevate the play and to your point, Sam, what we're seeing, a 70 burger a few weeks ago, obviously that's against a Denver Broncos team that
That's
is just
crazy.
has no identity right now. But when we think of identity and we think of the Dolphins, it's hard not to think of domination.
Right, and you forgot a couple names there. I mean, Jalen Waddle's kind of been slow to start the season. Devon Achane, this rookie who had like 500 yards in the first 5 games. He's hurt. He's on IR for a little bit, but he's been spectacular. And really, like, there's so many running backs in that running back room. No one even talks about Jeff Wilson Jr., who's still, like, not active, and they're not playing him. Salman Ahmed was in the lineup this week. But we're also forgetting, like, this is a team that's, like, been built to win. And there's one guy that no one talks about because he's been hurt all year and he plays for the Dolphins and is coming back in the season, and that's Jalen Ramsey. I mean, they added Bradley Chubb last year. I mean, obviously we're talking about the offense, and the offense is getting a lot of accolades, but when you're talking about being a serious contender and playing into December, you're going to have tough games against Buffalo, against Kansas City, against Baltimore and Cincinnati, and all those tough teams, and you need to have a defense that can make plays because you can't always rely on this offense. I mean, when you look at who they face, right? This is going to be the really big test. The other big test that they had was in Buffalo a few weeks back, and they got, a real reality check in terms of what they could do. They came off that 70 burger. Everyone was talking about them. Is this crazy? Tyreek's on pace for 2,000, and the Buffalo silenced that pretty quickly on the road. Now they're going on the road in a very hostile environment. I mean, you're going to have the Eagles, you're going to have the Phillies fans probably there too. I mean, the Phillies players probably there. It's going to be a wild atmosphere. So I'm very excited about this team. I really like the way they're coached. They're a really smart team. And when you look at all like the top speeds in the league, it's either Tyreek, Raheem Mostert, or Devon Achane. This team is just fast. They use guys in motions that I've really never seen, where they bring a wide receiver almost into like the tight end tackles position and then bring them out, and then all of a sudden the ball's going this way. And you just don't know how to follow them, especially in man coverage. I don't know a single defense, as good as they are, that can match up with these guys for speed in man coverage. You almost have to play cover 2 and cover 3 to prevent those big plays. And yet when teams still do that, they blow you with a slant or, a crossing route, and then they just go all the way around your defense. So greatest show on surf. I think that's definitely the coolest name I've seen in a long time.
You gotta love the greatest show on surf. I think you're absolutely right on everything you said there. I think the way that this team is built, you also add in Chase Claypool. You think about the players that are going to come back off the IR, as you mentioned, Jeff Wilson Jr. and Jalen Ramsey, and they're built to win. And there's a lot of arguments that can be made that Mike McDaniel could be a shoo-in for Coach of the Year, the way that this team is looking. But there's another coach in the NFC and a team that's dominating right now that I think has to get a lot of love, because going in, they were, for the first time in a very long time, division favorites. They're currently 5-1. And Sam, you and I both know we're talking about Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions. The Lions. Are you shocked by what you're seeing in this team right now?
No, not at all. First of all, I don't know if you saw his little post celebration in the locker room where he pulled out a $5 bill and said, "Do you see what this is?" And everyone's like, "It's 5." He goes, "Here's another thing." And he pulled it from another pocket. "That's 5 wins. That's 5 wins. Honestly, I saw this. I love this guy. I mean, he was a Dallas Cowboys tight end back in the day. And then his press conference, I think, really put himself on the map, put the Lions on the map. And for years, there's guys like Jim Caldwell that have come in there. Jim Schwartz, who's obviously in Cleveland doing a masterful job. We saw with the Browns. Seth picked the 49ers in the survivor pool, not to rub salt in the wound.
We're not talking about that.
I'm just talking about the Detroit, history over the last 20 years. Matt Stafford, they traded for Jared Goff. Everyone's kind of wondering where they are. They jump up to get Jahmyr Gibbs this year. I saw everything I needed to see in that Sunday night game against Green Bay to end the year last year, where they ran that hook and lateral play to win and knock it in Lambeau, knock the Packers out and Aaron Rodgers' final game in Green Bay. I looked at that. I said, I'm taking the Detroit Lions to win the NFC North. I mean, there's no question about it. The Sun God is the Sun God. I mean, you got Craig Reynolds coming in from like 50 yards down the field. I wasn't 15, but it was like 15 yards, making a block. Amon runs around him. They've had a couple tough injuries, but Aiden Hutchinson, Waluigi, as they're calling him, the way he runs, there's so many exciting things about this. But what I really like about Detroit as a whole is they're a really well-coached team. And I watched like the Dallas Cowboys last night, and there was penalties. We saw Buffalo. We've seen teams that are good but getting themselves into penalty troubles. Detroit just seems to be resilient. They seem to be smart, and they drafted well over the last few years. Penei Sewell was an absolute stud. I mean, there's an offensive line that's really done a good job. Doesn't really matter if it's David Montgomery or Jahmyr Gibbs, but I like their weapons. I'm very curious to see if they add a wide receiver by the trade deadline. I think there's some interesting names out there that are floated around that I think could really take this team to another level, because if you look outside of Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams had his kind of welcome to the NFL party against Tampa Bay's first touchdown of the year. But this team is just coached well top to bottom.
I think it goes even more than just how well they're coached. They're bought in. What you see from this team, what you see from every player is they believe in them being arguably one of the best teams in the NFC right now. Obviously, they're in that conversation with the Eagles and the Niners, and for good reason. And I think the play that you mentioned when Craig Reynolds, came in flying with that huge block, that just shows me how much this team is bought in. You even saw it in week 1, Thursday night football, first game of the year. You're going against the defending Super Bowl champs, and you're doing a fake punt in your own end. Like, this is a team that has big kahunas. I love everything that I'm seeing from every player. And you look back at the trade that I think is now we can consider a win-win, the Jared Goff for Matthew Stafford, because I think you got to give a lot of credit to Jared Goff and how he's been able to elevate this team. Not saying, look, Matthew Stafford was a great Detroit Lion in his career, and he went to the Rams and he won a Super Bowl, and thus the win-win. I think it was just the best thing for both organizations. But Jared Goff, there's a lot to be said about how he's controlled the game, his tempo, how he's using all of his targets. Obviously, Amon-Ra coming into being an elite receiver significantly helps with that. But Jared Goff is a proven quarterback. He's been to a Super Bowl. He's got that veteran presence that's rallying the whole team together. And then you see players like young players like Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs all just buying in. And this Lions team has it's not the same swagger as the Dolphins that can always beat you with a jet or can, has all of this speed. It's a swagger of, what? We take our shit seriously. We're not a joke in this league anymore, and we're coming in to win games. Doesn't matter who you are.
I mean, when you think of the Detroit Lions throughout our lifetime, you think about those guys in the Detroit Lions, say in Ford Field, with those brown paper bags saying, like, sell the team, 0-16. Like, they went through all these motions, right? Ever since, they had some obviously bright moments with Calvin Johnson, a couple playoff appearances. But you're right, it is a win-win. And I don't think people saw that as a win-win when the trade went down and then the Rams won a Super Bowl that year. Everyone was like, well, Detroit, like, what were they thinking? I'm just looking up Jared Goff's stats. First of all, Buccaneers game this past Sunday, 353 yards, 68.2 completion percentage against a good, well-coached defensive team. 2 touchdowns, no picks, 107.5 QB rating. He had a streak, I think, going into the Seattle game, which was week 2, which was like 150, not 150, but there was a crazy streak he had of not turning the ball over. And then he turned a few balls over in the consecutive games after that. But he's been playing very well. And you're right, he's got a good command of that offense. I really like the offense that they're running. And you're right, most importantly is it all trickles down from the owners to the coach. Everyone is bought in. I mean, you saw videos where I saw in training camp they had the owner. They gave her the ball. She was there and she ran a play. It was really cute. And then there was a video that actually got released from HBO that was, we all saw it on Hard Knocks, but it was re-released, I guess, after this Craig Reynolds play when they were deciding, like, he's like one of our last cuts. Like, do we want him on the 53-man roster? And one of the coaches, like, he's who we represent. Like, and that was the wide receiver coach or the offensive coach. And then the running back coach is like, there's no one on the team that has a rapport with the linemen, with the offense, quite like Craig Reynolds. And you saw Amon-Ra give him a huge hug because, like, maybe he gets the first down, but he doesn't score if he doesn't get that block. And it just shows, like, when teams are bought in, anything is possible. And we saw it this week, any given Sunday, anything could happen. And the Lions truly believe that they can make a huge dent in the NFC, which we know right now is not as strong as the AFC. And it is a little bit wide open if there's some injuries to San Fran and the way Philly's been struggling, even though they're 5-1. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but to me, the Lions, there's no surprise. They're who we think they are. They're a tough team to face. They're hard-nosed. They'll fight. And when you think most coaches, like I watched Mike McCarthy, and like a lot of it is like time management. 8 seconds, could have ran one more play with one timeout, throw it through the end zone, then kick the field goal. He's like, no, there's 3 seconds left. I mean, it was just poor. Dan Campbell's, like you said, on opening night in Kansas City, a game that's like very tough to win, especially when his team's raising its Super Bowl banner, but also in Arrowhead, one of the toughest stadiums, and he goes for it on like 4th and 2 from his like 20. Like, who thinks about that in like the first half of the first game of the year? I was like watching that game and I was just like, okay. And as a football fan, you're just like, that's something I would do in Madden, sure, but like, is that like something that you do game one of the season? Probably not. And he did it. I just, again, it carried over from last year, and I think that's so important. Is what they've really built is a good foundation, but it's like you said, everyone's just bought in, and because of that, they're probably going to run through the NFC North no problem, and they could make a couple dents in the playoffs with a couple wins, one probably being at home.
Yeah, they definitely have a commanding lead in their division. I'm not sure if anyone in their division can even sniff them at this rate because, we all had all these high expectations with the Bears. That's not looking too good, and I'm sure we can dissect each division if we really want to, but in the interest of time, we probably won't. But, obviously, we're going into week 7. The Lions have been a welcome surprise. I think it's great for football to see them at the top of the NFC division or the conference. Sorry, the Dolphins we mentioned, but I want to kind of run through a few awards that we're going to kind of give. Obviously, these are the 2 early awards to really dish out, but so much has happened in football, and I think the message that we're getting here is that there's an identity, there's a precedent that we're starting to see, and the first one, it's got to go to the fantasy football fans. Who is your fantasy football player of the year? It seems like it's undoubted, but I got to ask you regardless.
Yeah, I mean, there's 3 guys, and you could do 1, 2, 3, but there's really just one guy. It's Tyreek Hill. And again, we're not giving roses like this guy wins the fantasy player of the year. Obviously, there's still plenty of football left to go. And we know the tougher, the more months it goes into in November, December, the tougher that the games are going to get, the closer they're going to get. But it's Tyreek Hill. I mean, this guy is almost at 1,000 yards by week 6. We're going into week 7, and, if there's injuries to Philly or Miami just plays their best game, he could probably hit it. I saw a stat yesterday, Calvin Johnson in his big 1,937, I believe, or 1,900 plus yard receiving, I should say. He was averaging 122.5 yards per game. That's incredible. That's like insane. Tyreek Hill's averaging 135.6. So it's like, that's an extra 13, 14 yards. And again, Tua stays healthy. Everything works out. But you look at that offense too, Raheem Mostert is the RB2 behind Christian McCaffrey. And if Christian McCaffrey is out for a while, then Raheem Mostert becomes the RB1 that most people probably didn't predict. And I think, I have him in fantasy. I took him way later. I was just like, oh, like someone's got to run the ball in Miami. Like, I don't know what they're, really going to be doing in terms of, running the ball as much because they're more of a passing dominant team. But Mike McDaniel, I think, learned from last year. And again, that was his first experience, right? And he got to the playoffs. He nearly beat Buffalo in Buffalo without Tua, right? This is a really well-coached team. We've already touched upon it. But when you traded for Tyreek Hill and the things that he's done, at $120 million for 4 years, I still think he's the most underpaid player in the league for what he does.
Yeah, I almost think at this point it's a surprise if he's not getting over 100 yards in a game. Like at this rate, him getting over 100 yards is become common, and it is something that is very not common in the NFL standards. And to see what he's doing in this offense is electric. And yeah, obviously, if we were talking a lot about the Dolphins earlier. If you have any of those players on your fantasy teams, you're probably in a good position right now in your fantasy leagues. But on the topic of fantasy, who would you say is your biggest sleeper right now that has just been coming in and has really been a welcome shock.
We're talking about fantasy sleepers.
Fantasy sleepers right now. I'll give you mine first.
Yes, yeah.
I'll
Let's
jump
go
in because
off that.
I think I gotta go with Zay Flowers. I mean, there was a lot of talk on. We're talking sleepers. We're not expecting these guys to maybe put up these insane numbers, but we're talking about consistently week in, week out. A guy who's proven to be the wide receiver one in Baltimore, by all accounts. Obviously, Odell's been hurt, but even a healthy Odell, I think Zay Flowers, the chemistry he has with Lamar, what he brings to that offense. And we saw, Lamar is throwing dimes and people are not catching the ball. And he's only going to start featuring Zay Flowers more. We haven't seen that same level of Mark Andrews production that we're so accustomed to in terms of like the red zone and everything. But Zay Flowers is coming in each week and he's making plays, and it's noticeable. And we look at this past draft where 4 receivers were taken back to back to back to back. You can very much make the argument that Zay Flowers is that best receiver of the draft class right now. And
I was saying that when he got drafted, like, there was no question. I was seeing what he was doing in Boston College, and I was just loving it. And in preseason, I just thought Lamar's got a new offense, and Zay Flowers is really going to be that guy. I think Odell's obviously lost a step. I mean, a lot of people say he's cooked. Mark Andrews is going to be your guy on the tight end that's going to get you those, big first downs, but someone to open down the field. We were in Cleveland. There was a play where Lamar ran out and it was like 2nd or 3rd and 14, and Zay Flowers caught a 54-yard pass. I mean, it was just, he gives them a different dynamic that, Torrey Smith maybe, or Anquan Bolden, but Anquan Bolden was more of a wide receiver guy. Jacoby Jones, like someone that can like really blow the top off defenders, and I really like what he's seeing. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to say, like, I've been on the Zay Flowers train, and I'll give Zay Flowers. My sleeper, also a receiver, 2nd-year receiver, and this might surprise you, Seth, Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver George Pickens.
Dog.
I mean, this guy, everything you watch him on tape, and you're just like, he blocks well, he gets pissed off. The more he gets pissed off, the harder he blocks, which is just something that you'd love to see a well-coached team. Again, Mike Tomlin, you think that there's just not a lot of talent around that offense and that team would struggle. Obviously, there's a lot of Fire Canada chats at Pittsburgh Penguins games because they want to get a new offensive coordinator. Kenny Pickett still trying to figure it out. But you look at George Pickens, I mean, he's up there. He's got more yards than Zay Flowers. He's got 22 receptions, 393 yards, 2 touchdowns. And, again, Pittsburgh's not an offense that you're always tuning into, right? With Miami and Kansas City and Philly and San Fran, there's so many things. But when you look at what the Steelers are doing right now, and they're right now, battling for that top spot in the AFC North, they are getting a lot of production from George Pickens, and a guy that I think we all kind of expected him to have a good year, but I don't know we expect the Steelers to have a really good offense, because without Big Ben and without some of those big names back in the day, there hasn't been that same steady hand at offense, especially when Matt Canada's leading the charge. But I do really like what George Pickens is doing, and that is my sleeper.
I love that pick. I think when you view that Steelers team, obviously you're immediately thinking about their defense, and they do have one of, if not the best defensive players in the game in TJ Watt. But George Pickens, what I'm seeing, I saw it last year and I see it again this year. He's fine going up against any defender and trying to make a play. He believes he can make every play, every ball that's thrown to him. His catch radius is freaking insane. It's all over the place, and the spectacular catches that he makes, because I mean, I'm not going to try and discredit Kenny Pickett. I don't think he's definitely a starting quarterback. I don't think he's I don't put him in my top tiers of quarterbacks. And often we see George Pickens making these ridiculous catches because he has to. But they are impressive.
Or it's a little to the side.
Exactly. So like I think, from fantasy or not fantasy, we're talking about George Pickens. We're seeing growth, we're seeing progression each year, and he's going to turn into a dominant player. I think the Steelers have a really good one with Pickens.
We talked about sleepers, we talked about standouts. One more topic about fantasy, but who's your biggest disappointment?
Ooh, that is a very good question. Look, I mentioned Mark Andrews. I think, where your draft value was, like, if you're expecting a tight end too, he hasn't been that guy. I think that's definitely a player
I've got some names for you. Let me give you some names, and you pick one of these names. All right, we'll go from there. James Cook in Buffalo, Kadarius Toney, Javonte Williams, T. Higgins, Justin Fields, Ramondre Stevenson. Out of those 6, who do you think is the most disappointing?
Ooh, that is a great question. I think so. I'm going to look at where their ADP was going into the season. I think that's a big tell on the level and magnitude of disappointment. From my own bias perspective, it's been Ramondre Stevenson because I've drafted him and he just hasn't. I played him on the bench last week, which obviously he had his best week of the season because that whole Patriots team is just a shit show right now. But and that's to put it lightly.
We've been using the word shambles.
But I think, from an ADP perspective, I got to put T. Higgins at the top of that list. And I just think this is an offense that has not been clicking in the first 6 games. And maybe that's because Joe Burrow wasn't 100% healthy. And then, T. Higgins really has only had one good week all season. But what I think we're starting to realize when Joe Burrow feels like his back's up against the wall, which definitely has been the case as they've had a slow start. Now, they typically have slow starts, the Bengals, but this has been pretty bad in terms of what the numbers are. He's only looking at the guy who he believes is open all the time, 7-Eleven, number 1, Jamar Chase, right? Like, he is going to heavily target Jamar Chase when he feels like he needs to get production going and he needs to get something going. And T. Higgins, a lot of people who are expecting this dynamic 1-2 punch to continue to grow and elevate from fantasy perspective. He hasn't been that wide receiver 1 or 2 for where people were drafting him. So I think if there's one thing I've learned with the Bengals is that as the season goes on, they're going to have some games that are just, explosive. They're going to get their rhythm. I think Joey B is an elite quarterback. I know, Sam, you feel the same way. So I'm sure they're going to get things figured out. But if we're talking the first 6 weeks where you drafted a guy like T. Higgins, I'd be pretty disappointed if I had him on my roster right now. That's for sure.
24 years old, playing in a contract year. Definitely, been a little banged up, but definitely, changed his number from 85 to 5. I mean, I don't know if that really makes a difference, but, he's definitely a guy, Ramondre Stevenson. Said, I'm going to go a different way, and I'll tell you why. I'm taking James Cook. It's not about ADP. It's about where I thought he was going to go progression-wise. They shipped out Devin Singletary, who, again, the Bills last few years, obviously, they're more of a pass-friendly team. The league is a pass-friendly league, but Josh Allen has been mostly the catalyst for running the ball this year. There hasn't been that run game, and Jordan Schultz, an NFL insider, reported yesterday that the Bills are actually hosting Leonard Fournette, who's been sitting on his couch. To me, that says 2 things. Number 1 is they feel like they don't have enough out of that running game. They've used Latavius Murray in the close out of that game. I didn't see James Cook anywhere. Right, he hasn't been hurt. This team that was linked to Dalvin Cook, and I know Miami was too, and the Jets. There was a lot of people that were interested, maybe bring the Cook brothers together. I think Buffalo was like, no, what we have in house is good. They brought in Damian Harris. I mean, our best condolences to him. Hopefully, a quick recovery after a scary incident on Sunday night. But they're missing a running back, and they feel like they need something to give them more of a punch. That they're willing to go to Leonard Fournette, who's been sitting on his couch. And again, probably still in shape and wanting to play, but that's a huge, cause of concern if you're a James Cook fan. And then secondly, I just think that for me in the pass game, we talked about just a second ago being pass friendly. Excuse me, James Cook for me, I thought was going to be a PPR fiend. I thought Devin Singletary last year didn't really provide that. I just don't think he had better hands. And James Cook was actually the guy, as the season went on, was that guy that Josh Allen trusted out of the backfield to throw the ball to. They need that weapon to complement what they have with Diggs, what they have with Gabe Davis, who have been playing very well this year. But when you've got 2 guys going down the field, you need a running back who can either do that halfback angle or just come out into the flat and make a play and break a tackle. James Cook has not been that guy. And I think a lot of people, including myself, had him a lot higher where we put him on our draft boards. He's just not lived up to it in my mind.
No, I think that's definitely fair. I think there's, this growing sense since Josh Allen has been the quarterback for the Bills that they haven't been able to create a run game. There's no identity in the run game. And I think that's been most evident with Zach Moss, as we see how he's been, lighting it up in an Indianapolis offensive scheme that is very run heavy and run dominant. And he's putting up big numbers. Like, Zach Moss was not the problem in Buffalo, is the point that I'm trying to make. And obviously, if they had Nyheim Hines, they maybe would be able to have more explosive plays coming out of the backfield that would make it easier for James Cook. But the reality is they haven't figured out the run game. Josh Allen does the most. Sometimes you want him to just, slide more often than he does. And maybe that's because he feels like he has to get those extra yards because his running backs can't. And I think the idea of bringing in Leonard Fournette could be a nice veteran presence that could help. But that run game is not established. And I think it's definitely fair to say that James Cook has been quite a disappointing contributor in fantasy perspective. No, I want to ask you on the topic of disappointment because, we're 6 weeks in and there are two teams in the AFC that I'm curious who you think has it worse right now because their identities are in shambles. And those teams are the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots. So Who do you think, if you're a fan of these teams, are you in a worse position or feel more disappointed in? Is it Patriots fans or is it Broncos fans? And no matter how you slice it, it's not good.
Right. And they're two of only 4 teams in the AFC with a losing record after 6 weeks. Titans and the Chargers now, who are both also 2-4. It's a great question. Honestly, I think that the Patriots are in a worse situation. And it's because they really believed in Mac Jones. And if everything that I've watched in the last month has shown me he's not there. And the Patriots clearly have struggled. They had Cam Newton at one point. They haven't had a quarterback since TB12. We all know, it's just been a tough sled. But this year's been a lot tougher. Judon got hurt in the Dallas game. Christian Gonzalez got hurt long-term as well in the Dallas game. Ramondre Stevenson, we just talked about a second ago, being a huge disappointment. When you look at the outside, weaponry, Devontae Parker just never really has been that guy. I know he had a couple big games in Miami, came over to New England. They signed Juju Smith-Schuster to a 3-year contract, and then reports the day later were his knee's about to explode. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Kendrick Bourne. They let Jacoby Myers, and he got a Jacoby Myers revenge game with a touchdown and a nice solid outing against his former team. But they basically paid Juju Smith-Schuster what they would have paid Jacoby Myers, because that's what the same deal with the Jacoby sign in Las Vegas was. Jacoby's been very good for them, the Vegas this year, but he was also very good for New England the last couple of years. And I like Kendrick Bourne, but I don't see the weapons. They brought in Zeke. I mean, again, a Cowboys fan, obviously, but Zeke saw it last year. He's lost a step. That happens most of the times with running backs. He caught a pass and went 70 yards for a touchdown, only to be called back because of a Hunter Henry holding. And it just shows me that offensively they don't have it. Defensively they don't have it. And I just think Denver, for whatever you want to say last year, it was a one-off horrible year. They're still bad this year, so it's not, sorry, I shouldn't say it's a one-off. But with Nathaniel Hackett, it was a one-off experience. Sean Payton does have a team that is believing. I saw that Thursday night against the Chiefs. They didn't play great. They're not a good team, but they battled hard against the Chiefs on the road. And I know it's a division matchup, right? But I thought, from what I've seen this year, I mean, they lost to the Jets. They're 1-5, I believe. I think that there's more of an optimism with Denver because they let go of Frank Clark that they brought in. They said, no. Randy Gregory, they signed to a big contract. They let him go. They want this youth movement to go. And I think when you got Sean Payton and you got the youth movement, this is not going to be a fly-by-night kind of situation where he comes into the situation and all of a sudden they're battling for a playoff spot. I personally believe that they were also going to struggle this year, but I have more optimism for Denver to really figure themselves out. I think if they trade Judy or Cortland Sutton, they can get some assets. They can have some assets in the draft. They obviously lost a lot of bad assets. I keep using the word assets, but they lost a lot of picks, compensations with the Russell Wilson trade that hasn't paid out clearly the way he is. But Russell Wilson hasn't been great like he's normally been in the past, but he hasn't been as bad as he was last year. So to me, I see there's encouraging steps, not many, but there's encouraging, whereas New England, I just don't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Look, you mentioned assets, and the reason for that is because the NFL is a business, and
That's
I
true.
think both these organizations have made very poor business decisions in the past 2 years. You touched a lot of it, or a lot of that on what the Patriots did, bringing in Juju Smith-Schuster, spending high draft capital for Mac Jones, hoping he's the answer. And they haven't figured it out. And I think getting blown out back-to-back games against the Cowboys and the Saints was a humiliation that Patriots fans are not used to. And I think everyone around the league who had to experience, especially, both of us growing up who experienced only the best of the New England Patriots year in and year out, to see them get completely blown out, to see Bill Belichick so frustrated, a guy who never shows emotion, to see how he looked in those 2 games. It felt like a nice full circle moment. It felt like the NFL was finally getting over, this dynasty that was the New England Patriots for the better part of 2 decades, and we can now put them behind us and say, yeah, you got to figure it out. You got a long ways to go. And I'm not worried about the Patriots at all this year. So I think from a Patriots fans, when you're so used to winning, yeah, this is disappointing. But I actually think it's more disappointing for Broncos fans right now, because last year, you obviously spent all of this capital, you sent all of these assets to bring in a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Russell Wilson, hoping that he's that answer. Things, for whatever reason, don't look good, so you blame it on the easiest scapegoat, which was the coach, Nathaniel Hackett, and you bring in a Super Bowl winning coach in Sean Payton. And so now they have no reason to fall into why it's not working, other than the fact that they're not good, that they're a team that has not figured it out. Russell Wilson is not the guy they thought he was going to be. Sean Payton, maybe he's still rusty and he hasn't been coaching for a while, but he doesn't have really a good standing with other coaches after the comments he made in the preseason to Nathaniel Hackett. So I think as a Broncos fan, it was like so easy to justify, okay, we got Sean Payton, we've got this team built, we got Judy and Sutton, Russell Wilson will figure it out in a more offensive offensive-minded team, and it's not working. It's not clicking. Javonte Williams came back from injury not looking like the same explosive running back he did out of the draft. So I think when you're a Broncos fan and you did everything in the past 2 years to be a win-now team, and you're currently 1-5 looking at ways to trade assets, that's pretty disappointing.
Sorry, go ahead. Finish
No, please jump in.
I was going to say, have you ever seen in football a guy on a Super Bowl trajectory in Russell Wilson, and then all of a sudden just like falls off a cliff? I mean, I thought he was Super Bowl Hall of Fame bound. Did I say Super Bowl? I think I meant Hall
of Fame trajectory. Yeah,
on a Hall of Fame trajectory, and then it fell off the cliff. Again, give us a moment. This is our first podcast that we're doing. There's going to be some wrinkles. There's going to be some mistakes, but yeah, Hall of Fame trajectory, and then just falling off a cliff, and I wouldn't even put him in the on the cuff radar for that.
You know what? The argument can be made from what I've seen these last 2 years in Russell Wilson. Dare I say it? He might be a system quarterback. I don't know if he can make those plays anymore. There is no excuses for him in this offense. I'm sorry. I mean, the only excuse that you can make is that Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy are not good receivers or are not good enough talent for him. Now, when we always look, when he moved to Denver, it's like, man, these are guys that are the same, if not better, than what he was using with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. But we saw Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf excel with Geno Smith. And we're seeing Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy regress. And, Steve Smith Sr. had some harsh things to say about Jerry Jeudy. Called him a jag. Jerry Jeudy didn't back that up. He did not back that up in that game Thursday night. And I think if you're an NFL team who's looking to acquire a talent like Jerry Jeudy, there is some cause for concern of what that talent is. Yes, he was a first-round pick that went before CeeDee Lamb, and boy, does that look like a big mistake. And as a Cowboys fan, you must be loving the fact that you're sniffing your way into an 88 that is proven to be a Michael Irvin-esque type of player. But yeah, the Broncos just for whatever reason, they have not been able to figure it out. Their defense, which was dominant, even last year, is giving up 70 points in a game in what was arguably one of the most humiliating games I've seen in an NFL team in a while. So there's some harsh truths being said, but we're 6 weeks into it, and I think these harsh truths need to be said.
Well, and let's also remember Jerry Jeudy went ahead of Justin Jefferson as well, right? It wasn't just CeeDee Lamb, it was Justin Jefferson as well.
Talk about bad business decisions.
Very bad business decisions. No, I think everything you said is right. I think we're both kind of on the same page. I think, one final point I'll say about the Patriots, and this is not like the put me over the top thing, is Bill Belichick, right? We've always thought, he controls the team, he controls the roster. He gave up Nick Folk for nothing to Tennessee. Nick Folk is the only kicker in the league that's perfect on the year. He drafted a kicker in Chad Ryland in the 4th round, which, again, Jake Moody, again, not to rub salt in the wound, but the kickers who've come out in this draft haven't been great. Chad Ryland, not been great as well. So, interesting decision by Bill Belichick, who's seeing Folk not missing a kick at all through the first 6 weeks of the season.
So as we conclude our first half of our first episode, look, there's so much football that we can be talking about and dissecting, and we'll be doing that each week. I want to transition now into the second half and things that we can look ahead for, because there's a lot of exciting things in the NFL right now. We're going into a week that has arguably one of the biggest marquee matchups of the season right now in Sunday night. Eagles, Dolphins. My hope is that it's the first primetime game that actually hits it over, because I feel like they haven't. There hasn't been a primetime game that has really been like, since, what the last primetime game that I remember just being in absolute awe was that Rams-Chiefs games like 3 years ago when Jared Goff and when Jared Goff and Patty Mahomes both put up 50 burgers, like just insane numbers. Like, and I'd love to see that. I think the NFL would love to see that.
Well, let's give you a quick recap of the Sunday night game so far. We got Bills-Giants 14-9. We had Niners-Cowboys, could have been that one, 42-10 Niners. We had Jets-Chiefs was probably the best Sunday nighter, 23-20, but it was really sloppy at the end.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes throws his 200 touchdown pass in his 84th career game, quickest player to ever do that. Steelers-Raiders, not many people tuned into that, 23-18. I know they have big fan bases. Patriots-Dolphins, 24-17. And the first one, 40-0. I think that one hit the over. But there was one team scoring in all the points. It was the Cowboys. But yes, I think there's not only one great game this week. I think there's 3 games this week that are really must-watch games. And, I was kind of really looking forward to Detroit-Tampa Bay last week. That was pretty much done. But you talked about Philly-Miami. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But there's 2 other games I want to bring up. Chiefs coming off a longer week with that win against Denver, against the Chargers. Those are always exciting games. Every time I see those games, comes down to the wire. You knew last year with Kelsey at the end was going to score, and he scored on like a walk-off touchdown pretty much. Derwin James knocking Kelsey in Kansas City or taking him down like Goldberg with a spear. And then the other one, we talked about the Lions against the Ravens. I think those are 3 really interesting games. And to be honest, we haven't really seen a week like this so far, where you've got 3 games that, if they live up to the hype, we could get one of these being the best game of the year so far.
And hopefully we'll be able to talk about that in the episode next week. But, when you bring up those games, I think about just, I want to talk about the Chargers-Chiefs games first of all, because Chargers at 2-4, you mentioned a stat that I think is mind-blowing in the fact that there's only 4 teams in the AFC with a losing winning percentage. That means that the AFC is very close, but you got to keep winning each week to be in competition for that wild card. And if the Chargers go to 2-5, they're in some tough sledding. Like, you can almost kiss the division goodbye already. And
division's not even in the question. I think it's just a playoff berth they're looking for.
You know what, you say that, but if they go 3-4 beating the Chiefs, like, you can't rule out anything. There's still a lot of football, but 2-5 is a pretty big discrepancy, and for them to come back into an AFC where, yes, you just need to be like at 500 to be in the wild card right now, but all of these teams are competitive and are winning their games, and 2-5, you're starting to really go in that wrong trajectory in a team that, after a huge disappointing loss against the Jacksonville Jaguars in the playoffs, have all this hope to come in and try and be, prove that they're a better team, a playoff team, a consistently, winning team. And it hasn't looked like that right off the back. And this game against the division rival in the Chiefs, the team that you're trying to find a way to get ahead of in any way possible. And if they lose this game, it could be devastating for them.
Yeah, I mean, by all accounts, they probably should have won last night against Dallas. Or I should say Monday night, because I don't know when we edit this, but it would be Monday night. They should have won this game, but this past Monday night, they didn't. They came off a bye week and they were at home, and similar to most Chargers games, except for that one viral fan who was like losing her bananas or whatever, losing her shit on every play, like she had her entire life savings on the Chargers money line. There were a lot more Cowboys fans, and that's the case. I mean, the Rams won a Super Bowl. They play obviously in the same stadium, so they get a little bit more fan base, but there was a lot more Cowboys fans when they panned around and very few Chargers fans. And that's a tough place to play in when you're at home and you don't feel like it's a home game. And that's going to happen pretty much, 90% of the time that they play at SoFi Stadium. Justin Herbert got paid, rightfully so. It was his turn to get paid, but they lose Mike Williams. Eckler's been hurt and banged up. I mean, he came back, but he still wasn't really, the type of person he is. Bosa's been banged up. Derwin. I honestly thought that they should have fired Brandon Staley after that loss to the Jaguars. You said the word big. I gave like this look like, huh? Big is an understatement, man. Like that was colossal. The detriment that I can't even speak. Sometimes I watch it. I had the Chargers money line in that game, and I was like, this is an absolute. I love that video of the guy who passed out and had Jaguars. I wakes up. It's like, we won. It's like, we were down 30 points. Like,
if only all my bets could be like that, I could take a nap and wake up with money.
Right? Just wake up and just say, oh, yeah, I cashed. It cashed. Just freak out. Cash. I honestly think that, Mahomes and the Chargers, they play great games. It really feels like almost like a college rivalry sometimes with like that back and forth kind of action. Should be a great game. I just don't think that the Chargers have that winning mentality. And I think Brandon Staley, although I do admire sometimes when he does go for it on fourth down or goes from his own zone. We watched a game. It was the Chargers Raiders game, right? Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't in. They had that rookie quarterback, and they picked it off Asante Samuel, and he could have ran all the way, and he's saying, go down, go down. Meanwhile, the Raiders have 3 timeouts. They could have easily done that. Then instead of on 3rd and 6 or something, Herbert throws the bomb to Palmer, and they get it, but it was just like, what are these play calls? Like, where is the, there's scheming, and then there's game planning, and then there's just like knowing what to do at the right time. And I'll never forgive him for that Chargers-Raiders final game of the year that should have ended in time. Both teams in the playoffs, and he called the timeout when the Raiders were like, we're running the clock out. We've guaranteed ourselves. They throw Daniel Carlson out there for like a 50-yard field goal, and he nails it. I don't think Staley is a good coach. I think, we'll talk about it maybe next week. The coaches that are on the hot seat that deserve to be fired, Matt Eberflus and Brandon Staley are top 2 in my mind. But this is a Chargers team that probably going to go 2-5. And you're right. Playoff spot, division. I think it's almost like, where are we looking? Like, we talked about disappointing teams. You got to put the Chargers in there,
Yeah, it's very hard to look at a Week 7 matchup and consider it a must-win, but as we just mentioned in various reasons, this could be it for the Chargers. This could be a must-win game already in the season. And, like you said, there was another game that's super exciting, the Lions-Ravens. Ravens, you never really expect a team to be great coming off an international matchup, but at home against Lions, that's going to be a dogfight. I'm really looking forward to that. I think there's a lot of great football ahead of us. We're really just scratching the surface here in the NFL season. We're getting to we're not even close to the witching hour of the NFL season.
That's true.
So there's so much more football to talk about. We're just fired up to finally be able to have these conversations. Look, we're 2 brothers. We're just 2 brothers who love football. We love talking about football. We haven't even got into our own personal fandoms that I'm sure we'll be able to talk about in the weeks ahead of us.
One final question, just before you sign up.
As I'm rounding out, and I'm trying to avoid this one question, you're gonna still ask it.
Right.
No, you gotta ask it now.
No,
you gotta ask it. The fans want to know what the question is. Don't put them into suspense.
The Lions played in America last week, and they're going to Baltimore in London. Do you think teams should get a bye, which they had for the first few years? Last year they stopped doing it. Do you think Baltimore should get a bye before they go back home, or do you think it's okay to go back?
That, to be honest, was not the question we were expecting. But the answer to that question that you have now put onto the table here is, I think it's okay. I think what people need to understand about the NFL is that you are very much in a regimented lifestyle, right? From everything you're doing for planning the week, leading up to it, from your body recovering, from the mental aspect. If you watch the quarterback show on Netflix, you realize that like one game ends, they're watching tape for the next game already. Like there is so much that you have to do from a mental, physical, and even emotional place each week to prepare yourself for a game. And when you add in an element of travel that's not within America, like we're literally traveling with different time zones from London to Baltimore, where, I've heard in Pat McAfee, like when you're in these Europe trips, there's some like partying happening after the games, right? Like you enjoy your time there because you've earned it, right? So to answer your point in this long-winded statement, I do think that teams should get a bye week after an international games. I'm pretty sure the teams who play in Germany, I know the Colts specifically, get a bye week after. So I'm not sure why it wouldn't be the same for teams that play in London, but yeah, it definitely puts the Ravens at a disadvantage going into this week, where the Lions, they're just, schedule as usual, going through the beat, and they're going to be ready for that game. But you know what? If you're a winning team and the Ravens, who have all of these, legitimate Super Bowl aspirations this year, you gotta just weather any type of excuse and show up on Sunday.
And you weathered that little curveball that you weren't expecting at the end. I completely agree, and we'll see how the Ravens and the Lions play out on Sunday, and we'll talk about it next week. Seth, take us home.
Yeah, to be honest, I thought you were going to bring up Anthony Richardson, and I'm still not emotionally ready for that. So
that would be salt in the wound for you with your Niners Survivor pick. So I didn't want to go that route.
Well, you know what? I'm sure we will as the weeks ahead, because we have to address it. I have a lot to say about it. Mostly sad news, but I digress. This has been really fun. I'm just happy to be able to do this with my big bro, my main man, my rotten soldier. But it's been a lot of fun. We're gonna keep talking football, keep enjoying these weeks and watching every Sunday, and maybe we'll win some bets, maybe we'll lose some bets, but we'll have fun doing it.
Any bets after the last few weeks? Maybe we just gotta keep games.
You gotta keep trying. You gotta keep trying.
All right.
Well, this has been an outro of all outros. And we're just having fun. And after further review, we are going to end it there. So signing off, I'm Seth. That's Sam. Just two brothers talking football, and we hope you enjoyed it.